Hey guys, it's Luke from Roll For That, and today we're going to be talking to both players and DMs on how exactly spell components work. Why am I doing this video? Yesterday, one of my players called me up. He was doing his level up to level 2 as a warlock and was asking me about which spells he should choose. And I, gave him the DM advice of whatever you think is going to work best for your character in the world as you know it currently. And he goes, oh, well, some of these spells require materials that I don't have, and I don't want to have to constantly be managing my materials. And then I realized that he, and probably a lot of other people out there, needed a little bit more information on how materials and in general how spellcasting components work. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Also, at the end of this video, I'm going to give some homebrew techniques for DMs on a couple things I do to make spellcasting a little bit more accessible and easy for my players. So basically every spell in D&D 5e has some sort of component. Now you'll see this on the spell card as either a V, an S, or an M. These letters can appear by themselves or in combination. So some spells might have V, S, and M, some might just have one, and some might have a combination of two. The V stands for verbal. What that means is your spell has some sort of verbal element for you to cast it. So you have to say something. Now, what you say is kind of up to you as a player, but think of this like in Harry Potter. As they cast magic in that world, they mostly just yell out the name of a spell. J.K. Rowling uses a lot of Latin terms. So you can incorporate that into your character if you feel like that fits. You can also use other ancient languages, and I would recommend coming up with a sort of theme for your whole spell kit based on your character. Now, spells with a verbal component actually require you to say the thing, which means if you are somehow gagged or silenced, you're not going to be able to cast that spell. Next up, we have the somatic component. What this big fancy word means is hand movements. Think about American Sign Language. That's kind of how I picture most somatic elements in a spell. What's important though is that you need a free hand to cast these. So, those of you who are dual wielding short swords and trying to cast Fireball, it's not gonna work. Last up, we have material components. To me, these are the most annoying part of spellcasting in 5e. They're also the most confusing for new players. A material component is something like a bit of fur, a feather, it can even go as high as a literal diamond or holy water. Now, if you're thinking about materials, try not to focus on the individual thing and more as in two groups. So there are materials that have a gold cost associated with them, and there are ones that do not. More money, more problems, right? How this works is any material without a monetary value, so you'll see in the description there'll be a number with a GP beside it. So anything without that means it's pretty mundane, and you're going to be able to use those materials from your component pouch or your arcane focus. Warlocks, sorcerers, clerics, druids, paladins, you're all going to have an arcane focus, a druidic focus, or a holy symbol that sort of acts as your materials. So you can avoid using materials and just use that. If you're a wizard and you have an orb, that means you can ignore the material associated with your spell as long as you're holding that orb, or at least touching it. Where this gets actually annoying is spells that have a material with a gold attached to it. Things like Animate Dead have a monetary cost, which means you can't just use your wand or your other arcane focus. You actually have to have the item. This in theory serves to balance spells, but in reality, I think it just messes people up more than anything. At the end of this video, I'm gonna go over some of the ways I get around this in my campaigns in a way that's still fulfilling and balanced, I think. Now again, these are the basic rules, but you're still gonna, as you level up, get items and abilities, depending on your class, that can allow you to kind of circumvent the rules of components. We'll get into that in more detail in later videos. We're just trying to give you a quick and dirty rundown of how everything works in its most basic form. All right, you've made it this far, so I'm gonna give you one way that you can kind of make material spellcasting a little simpler for your players. How I like to look at it is kind of like in the Ocarina of Time. You can upgrade your gauntlets, so you get your silver gauntlets or your gold gauntlets, and that allows you to lift heavier objects. That's kind of how I like to run things for my players who are a bit newer to the game, where I have them upgrade their arcane focus or their holy symbol or their druidic focus. Think of this like when they visit a blacksmith and they get improvements on their armor or better weapons. It's the same thing, but for their arcane focus. So if you are a warlock that levels up his staff, you can now cast things that require gold material. Let's say if it's the first time you're doing this, up to 100 gold. So if you're casting something like Greater Restoration that has 100 gold associated with the materials, you can just cast that with your Arcane Focus. No need for the material. And then as they go through their quest, you can add these sort of encounters with NPCs and actually make it kind of missions for their parties to go get that next upgrade up to, 2,000, 3,000, 10,000, 25,000. In higher levels, this might get a little more broken because of the spells they can cast with it, so just be aware of that. Another thing you could do is have them have an interaction with a merchant type person early on in the game and set up a magical portal to items. As part of your component pouch, you could drop in the gold necessary for the material you need, and then a second later, the material comes out. That means that there's still the limitation of gold, but they don't actually have to pre-buy the items or have them in stock. It's kind of a fun way to add some extra magic to your world. Just be aware, you're gonna wanna put that fine print that anything but gold that goes in the portal is immediately destroyed, as the merchant is very scared of lethal things coming through. That way your players don't start to use this to get around plot holes, save their magic items and then go back to the town where the merchant's at and pick them up. All right, guys, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Maybe you even learned something. Anyway, make sure that you like and subscribe. We have a ton of content coming your way. And don't forget to cast Toll the Dead on the bell notification so that you never miss a video. Also, we want to hear from you, so let us know in the comments below what you are doing in your campaigns in regards to spellcasting and how you deal with components.